The grand marble staircase of the Vance estate was the kind of cold that could steal the breath right out of your lungs. It was built for imposing entrances and dramatic exits, and today it was serving the latter. A nurse, a woman named Clara, with frantic eyes, was hurrying down the steps, gripping her packed bags as if the house itself were chasing her. At the bottom, a stoic butler, Arthur, stood as still as a statue. He didn't need to ask what was wrong. He'd seen this exact scene play out 22 times before. "I can't do it, Arthur," Clara whispered, her voice cracking. "No amount of money is worth that. He's a ghost in his own house, and he wants everyone else to be one too. He doesn't want a nurse. He wants a warden for his own prison. I quit." Arthur simply inclined his head, his face a perfect mask of professional resignation. He opened the heavy oak door, and the nurse fled without a single backward glance. As the door clicked shut, sealing the oppressive silence back inside, a voice echoed from the top of the stairs. It was a voice stripped of all warmth, as sharp and brittle as ice. "Arthur, see to it that her agency is informed she is not fit for private care. And then, call them. Tell them to send the next one." For 6 months, ever since his wife Lillian's death, Alastair Vance had systematically dismantled his own life. All that was left was the hollow shell of a man rattling around a multi-million-dollar mausoleum. Grief had become a destructive force, and Alastair had turned its full power inward, determined to remain king of his cold, silent castle. He'd driven 23 nurses to quit, each one a casualty in the war he was waging against his own heart. He was untouchable, unreachable, a man encased in ice. But he was about to meet nurse number 24, and nurse number 24 was a man who knew that some things aren't meant to be broken, but melted. So, how exactly does a man who refuses to be fired thaw a completely frozen heart? If this has you hooked, hit that like button and settle in, because this is a story about how the deepest grief can sometimes lead to the most unexpected love. Miles away, in a cramped apartment that smelled of cinnamon toast and laundry soap, Ryan Walker was trying to perform a magic trick, paying for groceries, a past-due electric bill, and his daughter's field trip with the $63 in his bank account. He was, to put it mildly, failing. Ryan was a nurse, and a damn good one. He had steady hands, a calm voice, and patience that could soothe the most terrified souls. But his last hospital had downsized, and freelance gigs were few and far between. As a single dad and a widower himself, his 6-year-old daughter Sophie was a bright, giggling sunbeam who deserved more than a life dictated by overdue notices. The mountain of medical bills from his late wife, Emily, was a quiet, constant reminder of a battle he'd already fought and lost. He was running on pure, quiet desperation. When his phone rang, he figured it was just another creditor. "Hello?" he answered, the weariness heavy in his voice. It was his agency. "Ryan, I've got something," his agent Martha said, her voice tight. "It's unconventional. Private care, live-in." Ryan's heart leaped. "I'll take it." "You didn't let me finish," Martha warned. "It's for Alastair Vance." Ryan knew the name. Vance Industries was a titan of innovation, and Alastair Vance was the ruthless genius behind it. The papers, ever since his wife's passing, painted a picture of a brilliant man turned tragic recluse. "He's been through 23 nurses in 6 months, Ryan," Martha said bluntly. "They say he's impossible. Cold, dismissive, cruel. Nobody lasts more than a week. The last one, Clara, just called me in tears." Ryan glanced at the eviction notice on his fridge. He looked at a crayon portrait Sophie had drawn of them with the words, "My daddy is a superhero," scrawled underneath. "What's the pay?" he asked. The figure Martha named made him sit down hard. It wasn't a lifeline, it was a rescue helicopter. It was enough to clear Emily's debts, fix his rattling car, and guarantee Sophie's school fees for a year. It was a chance to finally breathe. "I'll be there tomorrow," Ryan said, his voice firm. "I won't quit." The next day, standing before the imposing iron gates of the Vance estate, Ryan felt a flicker of intimidation. It was less a home than more a fortress, a monument to wealth and isolation. He was greeted at the door by Arthur, the butler, whose eyes held a look Ryan couldn't quite place. Pity, maybe? Or just morbid curiosity? "Mr. Walker, this way, please." Arthur led him through the grand, silent foyer. The air was still and cold, every surface gleaming and sterile. It felt unlived in, like a museum exhibit called The Anatomy of Sadness. They stopped before a set of towering mahogany doors. Arthur knocked once, a soft, deferential rap. A clipped "Enter" was the reply. The study was a cathedral of shadows and expensive leather, where sunlight struggled to pierce through thick-drawn curtains. Behind a desk the size of a small car sat Alistair Vance. He didn't even look at them, his eyes fixed on a stock ticker glowing on a massive screen. He was handsome in a severe, hollowed-out way, his suit immaculate, a man carved from granite. "Mr. Vance," Arthur began, "this is Mr. Ryan Walker from the agency." Alistair let the silence stretch, a deliberate exercise of power. Finally, he spoke, his voice as frigid as the room. "Turn around." Ryan, taken aback, did as he was told. "Your posture is adequate," he stated, as if inspecting furniture. "Your file says 8 years of experience, ICU and palliative. Why are you unemployed?" The question was an accusation. "Hospital downsizing," Ryan answered to the wall. "A likely story," Alistair muttered. He finally swiveled in his chair, his gaze landing on Ryan's shoes, clean but undeniably worn. "Look at me." Ryan turned. For the first time, he met Alistair Vance's eyes. They were a startlingly pale gray and as empty as the house. Alistair's lip curled in a faint sneer. "Your shoes are scuffed. A man who can't attend to the details of his own presentation can't be trusted with the details of my health. You're fired. Arthur, show him out." Arthur's shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. "Here we go again. Number 24, tenure 4 minutes." But Ryan didn't move. "Did you not hear me?" Alistair snapped, a flicker of irritation in his stare. "You are dismissed. Leave." Ryan took a breath. "No," he said, his voice quiet but unyielding. The single word hung in the air so audacious that even Alistair seemed momentarily stunned. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I said no," Ryan repeated calmly. "My contract, which I assume you haven't read, stipulates a 1-week minimum, payable in full, regardless of termination. So you can fire me, Mr. Vance, and I will sit in the guest suite you are contractually obligated to provide for 1 week, and you will pay me for the privilege. Or I can do the job I was hired to do. The choice is yours, but I'm not leaving." He didn't raise his voice, he didn't issue a challenge, he just stated a fact, a rock refusing to be moved by the storm. This was new. The other nurses had pleaded, cried, or stormed out. None had simply refused. Alistair stared at him. He was a man who moved mountains with a single command, who bought and sold companies and fired people without a second thought. And this quiet, unassuming man in scuffed shoes had just looked him in the eye and told him no. For the first time in 6 months, the silence in the room wasn't just empty, it was charged. The immovable object had just met an immovable object, and a crack, hairline thin but undeniably there, had just appeared in the ice. The first week was a silent war. Alistair treated Ryan like he was invisible, speaking only through Arthur and issuing curt, dismissive orders. He refused the meals Ryan prepared, ignored the medication schedules, and worked relentlessly from dawn until deep into the night. He was testing him, waiting for him to break and quit like all the others. But Ryan didn't break. He simply endured. He replaced the untouched meals with fresh ones, silently. He left the medication on the desk with a glass of water, silently. He was a quiet force of stability in a house built on chaos, his authority coming not from challenging Alistair, but from his unwavering competence. The first real shift happened about 10 days in. Ryan was in the kitchen when Arthur rushed in, his famous composure finally fractured. "Mr. Walker, come quickly. It's Mr. Vance." Ryan found Alistair in the study, slumped in his chair, a hand pressed to his temple. His face was ashen, his breathing shallow and rapid, a dizzy spell brought on by stress, exhaustion, and not eating. "Get out," Alistair rasped, trying to wave him away. Ryan ignored him, moving with the calm efficiency of a seasoned nurse. He took Alistair's wrist, his fingers finding the thready, fast pulse. "Mr. Vance, I need you to breathe with me," he said, his voice low and steady. He didn't ask for permission. He simply took charge. He guided Alistair through slow, deep breaths, dimming the harsh computer monitors and explaining in a calm monotone that it was a classic vasovagal response, frightening but not life-threatening. For the first time, Alistair didn't fight. He was too weak. He just followed the sound of Ryan's voice, a steady anchor in the storm. After a few minutes, color began to return to Alistair's face. Ryan brought him a glass of water with an electrolyte tablet and a plate with a few plain crackers. "You need to eat this," Ryan said. It was not a request. Alistair looked from the crackers to Ryan's unyielding face. He wanted to refuse, to lash out, but the lingering weakness and the quiet authority in Ryan's eyes disarmed him. He picked up a cracker and ate it, then another. That was a victory, but Ryan didn't treat it as one. It was just his job. For Alistair, however, it was a profound shift. He had lost control, and the person who took over did so not to dominate him, but to care for him. A few days later, Ryan was asked to air out the East Wing, a section of the house closed off since Lillian's death. As he opened windows, he stepped into what was clearly her personal sitting room. It was an untouched time capsule. A half-finished scarf lay in a knitting basket. A book of poetry lay open on a table, a passage underlined. Moving with respect, he didn't disturb anything. He saw the room not as a shrine, but as the space of someone who was deeply loved. He picked up the book. Rilke. He read the underlined passage. "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." He placed it back exactly where he found it. But as he turned, Alistair was standing in the doorway, his face a mask of thunderous rage. "What are you doing in here?" he snarled, his voice vibrating with raw pain. "Who gave you permission to touch her things?" "Arthur asked me to air out the wing, Mr. Vance," Ryan said calmly. "I don't care. These rooms are not to be entered. Her things are not to be touched, especially not by you." He was shaking, his grief manifesting as pure, white-hot fury. "You are paid help. You have no right." Any of the previous 23 nurses would have crumbled, but Ryan stood his ground. He looked Alistair directly in the eye, and his voice was filled with a quiet, heartbreaking truth. "You're right, I didn't know her," Ryan said softly. "But I know grief, and I know it can turn a house into a tomb. With all due respect, Mr. Vance, she doesn't deserve a tomb. She deserves to be remembered in a house that's still alive." The words struck Alistair like a physical blow. No one had ever dared to frame his grief not as a sacred duty, but as a disservice to the woman he loved. The rage drained out of him, replaced with a vast, hollow emptiness. He turned and walked away. That night, for the first time, Arthur reported that Mr. Vance had eaten his dinner. The real turning point, though, came from a 6-year-old girl with a missing front tooth. Ryan's video calls with Sophie were his lifeline. One evening, Alistair was walking past Ryan's room when he heard a child's laughter. He paused, an intruder in his own home, and couldn't help but listen. "Is the grumpy man being nice today, Daddy?" Sophie's little voice chirped. Alistair flinched. He heard Ryan chuckle, a warm sound that felt alien in this house. "He's quiet today, Sweet Pea. That's a good day. Did you finish your dinosaur drawing for me?" "Yes, it's a stegosaurus. He has big plates on his back to keep him safe," she explained. Alistair stood frozen, listening to their easy, loving banter. It was a painful, beautiful reminder of what a home was supposed to sound like. It was a glimpse into the life of the man he saw only as an employee,
revealing a depth of character and paternal love that was both admirable and deeply poignant. From then on, the ice began to thaw. Orders stopped coming through Arthur. Alistair would occasionally address Ryan directly with curt questions like, "Did my 10 o'clock cancel?" One evening, as Ryan was ending his call with Sophie, Alistair appeared at his open door. "Your daughter," he said, the words sounding rusty. "She likes dinosaurs." Ryan looked up, surprised. "She's obsessed. Thinks she's going to be a paleontologist." Alistair nodded. "Lillian, my wife, she wanted to be a botanist. She loved the gardens." He hadn't spoken her name aloud to another person in 6 months. It wasn't a long conversation, but it was a bridge. The butler, Arthur, noticed it all. One morning, he stopped Ryan in the hall. "Thank you, Mr. Walker," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for not quitting." They started having quiet, late-night talks. They discovered shared experiences, from stubborn fathers to the pressures of a legacy. These small confessions eroded the barriers between them. Ryan was no longer just the nurse. He was becoming a confidant, a friend. The fortress was still standing, but the cracks were spreading, and light was finally getting in.
The storm that finally shattered the fortress arrived on a cold, rainy Tuesday in October. It was the 1-year anniversary of Lillian's death. In the week leading up to it, Alistair had been receding, the fragile progress they'd made evaporating. The silence returned, heavier and more menacing than before. He stopped eating. The light in his eyes dimmed. On the morning of the anniversary, Alistair locked himself in his study with a single command: "No one is to disturb me, for any reason." The day wore on, the rain beating a relentless rhythm against the windows. Ryan respected his wish, but as afternoon bled into a dark, stormy evening, a professional dread began to coil in his stomach. This wasn't solitude, it was a descent. At 10 p.m., Ryan stood outside the study doors with a tray. He knocked, no answer. He knocked again, louder. "Mr. Vance? Alistair?" Only the sound of the rain replied. A primal fear, the kind a nurse feels when a monitor goes silent, gripped him. He tried the handle, locked. He ran to find Arthur. "I need the master key for the study, now." Arthur, his face pale, retrieved the key, his hand trembling as he handed it over. When Ryan pushed the door open, the room was pitch black, lit only by the ghostly glow of a tablet on the floor. It was playing a home movie on a loop. Lillian, in a garden, laughing as she turned to smile at the camera, at Alistair. And there, on the floor, amidst scattered photographs, was Alistair. He was curled in on himself, racked with silent, shuddering sobs, hyperventilating in a spiral of pain. He wasn't a CEO, he was just a man, utterly broken. Ryan moved slowly, deliberately. He knelt on the floor a few feet away, not touching him, but making his presence known. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat with him in the darkness, an anchor in the chaos. An hour might have passed. The shudders began to subside. Finally, Alistair's voice emerged, a raw, broken whisper. "It's my fault. We had argued. I was angry about some stupid deal. I wasn't there. I should have been there." The poisoned secret he'd held inside for a year finally spilled out. Ryan listened, and then he shared a piece of his own broken heart. "Emily, my wife, the last thing I said to her before her final surgery was about a late credit card bill. I was so worried about the money, and I can't ever take it back. I can't ever replace that stupid, meaningless worry with, 'I love you,' one last time." He looked at Alistair, the power imbalance between them gone. In that dark room, they were equals. "Grief is a liar, Alistair. It makes you believe you had control, that you could have changed things. But we aren't gods. We're just men who loved." In that moment of shared, devastating honesty, the last of Alistair's icy walls didn't just crack, they turned to dust. He looked at Alistair, truly saw him, and wept, not in silence, but a torrent of a year's worth of unshed tears. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Weak sunlight filtered into the house. Alistair appeared in the kitchen as Ryan was making coffee. He was pale, but for the first time, his eyes were clear. He looked exhausted, but he also looked free. He sat on a stool at the counter. "Thank you," he said. The words simple, but holding 1,000 emotions. For last night. For everything. Ryan simply nodded and pushed a mug of fresh coffee toward him. "How do you feel?" Alistair considered it. "Crushed," he admitted, "but lighter." They sat in a comfortable silence as the morning brightened. The house was still quiet, but now it was a peaceful quiet, the quiet of a new beginning. Months passed. The Vance estate transformed. The heavy curtains were thrown open, flooding the halls with sunlight. Fresh flowers sat in every room. The overgrown gardens were being carefully restored, a riot of color against old stone. But the most profound change was the sound of a child's laughter echoing off the marble floors. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Sophie chased a giggling Alistair around the grand foyer. Alistair, no longer a ghost in a bespoke suit, but a man in a simple sweater, let him catch him, scooping her up and spinning her around until she shrieked with delight. Ryan stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, just watching them. His financial desperation was a distant memory, but the real treasure was this scene, this new, unexpected family. Alistair had found his way back to the world. He learned that love doesn't die. It can become a guide to finding a new purpose. He was learning to honor Lillian's memory not with sorrow, but with joy and connection. He put Sophie down and walked over to Ryan, his eyes full of a quiet, profound love. He wrapped his arms around Ryan's waist. "I never thought I would feel this again. Happy." Ryan smiled, resting his head against Alistair's. "Turns out the grumpy man can be pretty nice," he teased softly. The story of the impossible CEO who burned through 23 nurses only to be saved by the one he couldn't fire was their story. It was a life rebuilt from the ashes of grief, proving that even the coldest hearts can be taught to love again. The nurse hadn't just done his job, he had brought a man and a home back to life. If their story touched your heart and you believe that love is the most powerful medicine, let us know in the comments with a heart. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that prove even the deepest grief can't extinguish the hope of a new dawn.